Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video and welcome to the high IQ space. This channel and this space is reserved for high IQ individuals like yourself. So if you're already part of the group, congratulations. I believe there's over 1,000 of you here. You guys are my very good friends and very loyal supporters. So I really appreciate that. And throughout the years, we've been having high IQ discussions, and I know most of you guys because you're on my comment sections, always commenting. And I learn from you guys, and obviously, I hope you guys learn from me as well. So we are helping one another grow as well. So I really, really appreciate you guys joining. So we're gonna have some high IQ discussions in this channel, and only high IQ people are allowed here, by the way. If you are low IQ guys, don't worry. We don't discriminate. We are here to teach and share our knowledge. So if you are here and you want to learn, I have no problems with that. And nobody has any problems with that. We're all here to help and make you learn. And we are here to educate you. So welcome on board, guys. Welcome on board. So let's talk about Huawei today. Our discussion for Huawei, we're going to talk about a little bit history of Huawei, why they got sanctioned, how Huawei has developed, how Huawei has fought the sanctions, how Huawei is heading, where it's heading, and America is absolutely panicking. So what should America do? Should they stay as they are, sanctioning Huawei, or should they allow Huawei to come back in to the United States and release all the sanctions? Or should there still be a tech war which escalates further? And we all know which way this tech war is going to go. We all know that. So what should US do in this case? So we're going to have this discussion. We're going to obviously carry on the comment section. I'll let you guys, you know, put your input in. I'll obviously join in the comment section as well. So without further ado, let's start the show, guys. So Huawei has released some news today that they have uncovered a new type of technology or a new type of way to create 1.4 equivalent chip by 2031. So 1.4 nanometers equivalent. So I want to kind of reiterate, it's not 1.4 nanometers size of the chip that Huawei is talking about. They are talking about 1.4 nanometers equivalent. So they will achieve this equivalent. So when they say equivalent, they mean they will have a chip which will have the same sort of power as a 1.4 nanometers chip. So it doesn't have to be a 1.4 nanometers exactly, but you will have the same sort of power, same sort of energy, input, output. You catch my drift. And the way they're going to do that is by layering. So they have been using a technique of layering different transistors together. And rather than making these transistors smaller, what they have found is layering, and they have used AI to find a way to optimize the way, you know, electricity and power, light sources, the way these transistors give out energy. So they have basically optimized it. Rather than making it smaller, they have made them wiser, if that makes sense. They have optimized the design. And Huawei is the only company that's doing that in this world. And so in a few years, they should have a design which is just as powerful as a 1.4 nanometers chip. So I saw a lot of online comments today, a lot of haters and online comments, you know, basically saying, oh, Huawei is still not as fast as TSMC or Samsung or Intel. Intel is using EUV machines, the latest EUV machines, they can go beyond 1.5 nanometers. They can go even smaller than that. And I replied to them. I replied to them, and they replied to me back, by the way. So I replied to them, okay, so tell me one thing. How much do these EUV machines cost from ASML? So he replied, he said 400 million. I said, okay. So I want you to go and investigate and come back to me and tell me how much the DUV machines cost. So he took a long time, but then I thought he just gave up or something. And he came back with an answer. He said 40 million. So I sent him a long reply and I said, okay, so can you see the issue here? And he couldn't really understand because he's obviously low IQ, guys. So I told him, I had to explain it to him. I said, look, TSMC, Intel, Samsung, they use EUV machines costing 400 million, right? So Huawei can create the same kind of chip with the same sort of power with the DUV machines, which cost 1/10 of the price. So tell me, who is the actual winner here? Is it TSMC? Is it Samsung? Is it Intel? Who are making these chips with a $400 million machine, or is the winner Huawei making the same chips which give out the same power with a $40 million machine, which is 1/10 of the price, by the way? So who's the clear winner? So he had to concede after that. He basically said, yeah, I see your point. I know what you mean. So this is the problem with so many low IQ people. You have to make sure, you have to kind of logically make them understand. You got to rewire their brain. You have to, basically ask them certain questions and let them do their own investigations. And then they will always come back and say, okay, yeah, you got a point, or yeah, you're right. Most of them will, by the way, but some of them are so stubborn and so, let's just say, set in their ways and so brainwashed, they will never see it. Some people you can never ever, people that are completely brainwashed, you will never get to them. Even if you show them the truth in front of their face, even if truth slaps them in their face, they will never see it. But this guy, at least, he acknowledged that I'm right. He acknowledged that, yeah, I see your point. So this is the point, guys. If Huawei can create the same kind of chips, for 1/10 of the price, it's over. Game over for the West. That means, Huawei can sell these chips for 1/10 of the price around the world. And who do you think will buy these chips? Everybody will buy these chips if they're 1/10 of the price. Can you see why this tech war is going to be over in 5 years, guys? And this is why the United States is panicking. Absolutely panicking. So let me tell you a brief history of Huawei. This is for, most of you know the history, but this is for any new listeners who don't know. Okay, so I'm not repeating past videos. I'm gonna just summarize very quickly for those people who don't know the history of Huawei. So obviously our goal is to educate people, so we are educating people here. So if you guys don't know, Huawei, is the biggest tech company in China, and they specialize in 5G networks. So all the Wi-Fi, 5G towers and 5G networks all comes from Huawei. And Huawei was actually contracted to set up 5G around the world. All the Western countries were using Huawei products. And then Huawei also had a contract with UK, London, and Europe to set up 5G networks in UK and in Europe as well, Germany, France, you name it. Canada, Australia, global south countries, Saudi Arabia, literally nearly all the countries in the world, including America, by the way. So obviously Donald Trump came in and got, he basically started having a tech war against China. He was in his first term, he was literally anti-Chinese. Through every speech he would say anti-Chinese rhetoric. He would say things like China is eating our lunch, blah blah blah. And then he started this tech sanction war with China, and he kicked out Huawei from America. And then he basically forced all of these Western countries, all his puppets, to kick out Huawei as well. So he forced UK to kick out Huawei, Australia, some countries in Europe, you know, other kind of countries they control, like Canada and other puppet nations that they control. And UK was already in the process of setting up 5G in UK. So they were setting up all the 5G coasts and all of the infrastructure. Everything was set up in UK. And then Donald Trump made a phone call to Boris Johnson at the time, and he was shouting at him over the phone. And Boris Johnson was like, "Oh, but we've already set up the infrastructure. It's going to be very expensive to take all that infrastructure out." And Boris Johnson was shouting at him on the phone, "Just take it out, bloody take it out right now!" And Johnson, stupidly agreed. And then Britain basically paid, billions to set up 5G in UK, and then they have to pay billions to get all of these infrastructure out, all of these, 5G networks and posts and all the, work that they've done. So it's extremely expensive for UK. And what's more worse is they don't have a replacement. So in UK, we're still stuck with 4G. So they got these companies to come in, like Ericsson and all these other Nokia. And they don't really have real 5G, guys. I would say is more likely 4.5G. They don't. People in UK, they don't know what 5G is. You can just sell them 4G and they'll think it's 5G. They were like, wow, 5G. If they go to China or Korea, they will know how fast 5G can be. We're talking about downloading a full movie in under a second. That's how fast things are. But in UK, things are so people are so used to slow networks. Even if you give them a little bit, something a little bit faster, they get happy. Wow, 5G, we got 5G, 5G. When it's not much difference from a 4G. British people are used to such really bad service, guys. They'll accept anything you give them. So Britain has been really suffering with this 4G, 5G for the last, and technically they have fallen behind many countries because 5G brings so many benefits to a country. First of all, if you have 5G, you can transfer data across businesses, networks, data centers. So if you're running a business, you can save so much costs. If you're sending data across 4G networks, it just takes forever, guys. Because I've been working in IT forever, and that's part of my job, to transfer data across and from site to site, and it takes forever. You have to run jobs overnight, and sometimes they're unfinished because they take so long. And with 5G, would have solved so many problems. And UK businesses would have been able to send their data across sites, and things will run much faster. And plus, 5G brings so many benefits like remote surgery and robotics and drones, and there's so many avenues they could have done with 5Gs. But yeah, they missed out on all of that, guys. I think they've lost out on trillions and trillions that would have brought into the economy. They lost out on that. And then obviously, Huawei at the time, they were also selling very, very good phones. They were outselling Apple. Huawei phones at the time were much, much better than Apple. And this is the problem. That was the main problem. It wasn't nothing to do with security. Trump says that, 5G networks are a big, security issue in America. That's why they got rid of them. But the real reason is Huawei was eating Apple's lunch. They were outselling Apple phones throughout the world. Not just in China, but in terms of world sales, they were out. You know, they were out competing Apple. They were beating Apple um, in every benchmark. They had a faster camera. They had a faster phone. They had more innovation in their phones. Everything was better than an Apple phone. So the Americans obviously got scared. They got scared how Huawei was developing, and they came up with this security story that Huawei networks are not secure, blah blah blah, because they didn't want Chinese technology to take over. That was a problem. They were scared of Chinese technology taking over American and Western technology, and that was the biggest problem that they have. So they basically came after China, but not only did they sanction Huawei, they also sanctioned 1,000 other companies, guys. 1,100 companies they sanctioned. They put them on the entity list. So this entity list was started by Trump and carried on by Biden. So altogether, 1,100 companies on the entity list. So I remember at the time I used to have a Huawei phone in UK, and it was one of my treasured possessions. And then suddenly UK placed sanctions on Huawei. There was a Huawei store not far from me. I used to live in Stratford. There was a Huawei store in Stratford. They shut that down, so I couldn't even go to Stratford to, if there was any problems with my phone, I couldn't even go to Stratford to get it, fixed or replaced. And I was extremely angry at the time. So that's why one of the reasons I started a YouTube channel because of that. And there was other reasons as well, mainly because of Trump's racism, to be honest. And one of my friends got beaten up as well because of that. And I was so angry with all this anti-China rhetoric, and I decided to come online and start talking. So anyway, so yeah, they banned Huawei and they banned the Huawei phones, and Ren, who is the owner of Huawei, Ren, what was his full name? Ren Zhengfei, sorry, Ren Zhengfei. So his daughter got kidnapped by Canada, and this was under the instructions of Trump. So Trump basically told Canadians to kidnap Meng Wanzhou, his daughter of Huawei in Canada, and the reason is because Huawei was selling phones in Iran, and that was the excuse they gave. So they basically decided to kidnap her because of it, and they kept her there for at least a couple of years until Biden released her eventually. And Trump was really being really harsh on China back then, guys. They not only did they ban Huawei, they literally banned everything Huawei was using. Huawei was using most of the parts for the phone. They were using Western parts. They were using Google as the software, obviously Android. They were using Oracle as the database. They were using Oracle as the e-business suite. All of the products Huawei was using, was Western products, and they, sanctioned Huawei really, really badly. Literally, Huawei had to build everything from scratch, guys. Everything from a new operating system to a new database to a new, e-business suite. Everything they had to build from beginning. And I remember when Ren came on an interview, he did an interview in China, and he said at the time, they banned us from semiconductors, but we don't do semiconductors. That's what he said. His own words. He said, this is not what we do. We only do networking. We do phones, but we don't do our own chips. We don't know how to do chips. And what did they do? They next thing they did was they bought a company called High Silicon, and they decided to work on their own semiconductor chips. and they obviously had a lot of help from China themselves, and the Chinese government, and year by year they've been getting closer and closer to making chips, and still, United States and ASML wouldn't sell Huawei their latest EUV machines, but they would sell the DUV machines. So Huawei found a way to use the DUV machines and rather than make EUV machines and make the chips from the EUV machines, they decided to use the DUV machines and basically find a way to make the best use out of the DUV machine. You can basically get as much as you can from the DUV. And that's what they've done. They found a way to stack chips and get that kind of performance. And that's what they're doing, guys. Rather than getting an EUV machine, they found another way, a workaround, which is just as effective, but it's like I said, it's 1/10 of the price, which means it's much cheaper, much cheaper. So they can release these chips with the same kind of performance, much cheaper than TSMC and many other products. And this is bringing shivers down the American spine. Americans are absolutely flabbergasted. They are scared. They don't know what to do, guys. They don't know what to do. And every day there's a new win for China. Uh, Yesterday there was a company releasing a graphics card. The day before, you had DeepSeek releasing a new product and they sending it, open source. Then you had another company, um, you know, releasing memory, DRAM. Every single day there seems to be a win on the Chinese tech level. Every single day. So America's really scared now. They don't know what to do, and you can see that when Trump went to visit China for the second time, he was very different. In the first term, he was very aggressive. He was very hawkish. He was not easy person to deal with at the time. He really went hard on China in the first term, and that time America had a lot of cards. They had a lot of cards, I must admit. But in his second time, he knows America has got no cards. Zero. There's zero that American can offer China that China wants. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They can't even sell Nvidia chips to China. And he thought, Trump thought he was being very clever by blocking the sales of H200. America thought, yeah, let's block the sales of H200. China's going to collapse. And China releases their own chips, the Huawei Ascend chips. And China didn't collapse. They're innovating. They are, you know, they're coming up with their own chips. And America's like, oh, what do we do now? Because America has sanctioned itself because they can't sell their own products to China. So China is basically the biggest market in the world at the moment. So instead of buying American products, China is now developing its own. And what's worse, they've lost their Chinese market, but what's worse is China is now selling these chips to the rest of the world, like the global south, and even these chips are ending up in American companies. Like a few days ago, they found American chips in Corsair, which is an American company. So you see, guys, not only have they lost the market in China, they are losing the market around the world as well because of their silly sanctions. So the question is, what should America do? Should they carry on with this tech war because they have clearly lost? If they do nothing right now, China will keep innovating and innovating, and eventually they will have surpassed America in the chip market. Huawei will release new iterations of their chips, new versions, and they're going to be much cheaper. By 2031, they're going to have 1.4 nanometers equivalent for 1/10 of the price. Can you imagine what that means? It's going to be, it's going to be DeepSeek moment times a million. Markets will crash overnight, guys. This is serious. Absolutely serious, because nobody will buy chips from TSMC, Intel, any Western chips. Everybody will rush to China to buy it for 1/10 of the price. The global monopoly of chips, it will be over. Global cartel is going to be over. Even now, people are celebrating China releasing, you know, their own version of DRAM, because global monopoly of SK Hynix, Samsung, and Micron were basically, increasing the price of their DRAM for the last few months. But in 3 months, they increased it by 400%, because these are cartels we're talking about. But now China's released their own DRAMs, and they're releasing it very cheap. And what's worse, these software companies in Korea are they're basically giving away bonuses to their, to the workers who work in these DRAM departments, and they are giving bonuses of $300,000-$400,000. Can you imagine a bonus of $300,000-$400,000? And these South Koreans are going out shopping to buy Ferraris and things. And no wonder people are angry, because the rest of Korea is angry, because the rest of Korea's average wage is around 22,000. So you have these basically memory DRAM engineers getting 300,000-400,000, bonuses. And they're getting these bonus because they've been increasing the price for the last 3 months. They've been increasing the price by 400%. So China is welcome in the market, and everybody's celebrating China coming in, because that means, these companies cannot increase prices like that anymore, because China is here to compete with them, and they're going to keep the price down. So that's it for today, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think America should just give up and start working with Huawei, cancel the sanctions, and do win-win situations, win-win scenarios with them? Or should they just carry on with the tech war until it's over? Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now.